Let's start with a simple question. What if the way most people think about energy is incomplete? Not wrong, just incomplete. Because when we talk about electricity at home, the conversation usually revolves around two things: where it comes from and how much it costs. The grid, solar panels, generators, monthly bills. But there's a deeper layer that rarely gets discussed. A principle that's been understood in physics for over a century, yet almost never enters everyday conversations about home energy. Not because it's secret, but because it doesn't fit neatly into how energy is typically sold, delivered, or explained. Today, we're going to explore that idea in a grounded, realistic way. No exaggeration, no impossible claims. Just a shift in perspective that might change how you think about energy altogether. Energy isn't just about production. Most systems we use today are based on production. Power plants generate electricity. Solar panels convert sunlight. Generators burn fuel. In every case, energy is something you create or extract, then use. That model works. But it also creates dependency, because if production stops, supply stops. And that's why outages feel so disruptive. There's no immediate fallback, but there's another side to energy that's often overlooked. Not production, but movement. The role of motion in energy. At a basic level, energy and motion are closely connected. This isn't new. It's one of the foundational ideas in physics. Moving systems carry energy. Rotating systems store energy. Even small amounts of motion under the right conditions can be converted into usable electrical output. You see this principle in many places. Hydroelectric dams use moving water. Wind turbines use air movement. Even regenerative braking in electric vehicles converts motion back into stored energy. The principle itself is simple. Energy doesn't always need to be created from scratch. Sometimes it can be captured, redirected, and reused. Why this idea gets overlooked. So if this principle is well understood, why don't we hear about it more often in the context of home energy? Because large-scale systems dominate the conversation. Utility companies focus on centralized production. Solar companies focus on panel installations. Generator manufacturers focus on fuel-based solutions. Each of these approaches has its place, but they all operate within the same general framework. Generate power externally, then deliver or convert it. The idea of smaller, localized energy systems, especially ones based on motion and efficiency, doesn't fit as easily into those models. Not because it doesn't work, but because it operates differently. Efficiency versus scale. Large energy systems prioritize scale. They're designed to power cities, millions of homes, entire regions. But scale introduces complexity, transmission losses, infrastructure costs, maintenance challenges. Smaller systems, on the other hand, often prioritize efficiency. They focus on limited specific outputs, not powering everything, but powering what matters most. And when you combine efficiency with motion-based principles, something interesting happens. The system doesn't need to generate massive amounts of energy. It just needs to sustain enough output to support essential functions. The misunderstanding around self-sustaining systems. Now, it's important to clarify something. You may have heard claims about self-powering or endless energy devices. Most of those claims are misleading or exaggerated. Physics still applies. Energy isn't created from nothing, but efficiency can be improved, losses can be reduced, and systems can be designed to maintain output with minimal input under certain conditions. That's where the real conversation should be. Not infinite energy, but optimized energy. Where this shows up in the real world. You're already interacting with versions of this principle more than you might realize. Electric vehicles use regenerative braking to recover energy that would otherwise be lost. Industrial systems use flywheels to store and release energy efficiently. Mechanical systems are often designed to minimize friction and maximize output over time. These aren't experimental ideas. They're established concepts, but they're usually applied at larger scales or in specialized environments, not in everyday home energy discussions, bringing the concept closer to home. So what happens when you start thinking about these principles at a household level? Not replacing the grid, not eliminating existing systems, but adding a layer of energy awareness focused on efficiency and independence. Instead of asking, how do I power my entire home? You start asking, what do I actually need to keep running? That's a different question, and it leads to different solutions. The importance of essential systems. In most homes, a small number of systems define comfort and stability. Refrigeration, basic lighting, communication devices, small electronics. Everything else is secondary during a disruption. If those essentials remain operational, the impact of an outage drops significantly. And maintaining those systems doesn't require massive energy production. It requires consistent, reliable output. That's where efficiency-based thinking becomes valuable. A shift away from all or nothing. Thinking traditional energy solutions often follow an all-or-nothing model. Either you're fully powered, or you're not. Either the grid is up, or everything stops. But real-world resilience doesn't need to work that way. There's a middle ground, where essential systems continue functioning even if the main power source is unavailable. And reaching that middle ground doesn't always require large installations or complex systems. Sometimes it starts with understanding how energy can be managed differently. Why this matters now. As energy systems evolve, households are facing new variables, rising costs, changing pricing structures, increased demand on the grid, more frequent localized outages. None of these are catastrophic on their own, but together they create uncertainty. And uncertainty leads to a simple desire: stability, not extreme independence, not complete disconnection. Just a reliable way to maintain the basics when conditions change. The real takeaway. The forgotten principle isn't a secret technology. It's a shift in perspective, from large-scale production to efficient localized function. From total dependency to partial stability. From reacting to outages to preparing for them in a practical way. Once you understand that, the conversation around energy changes. It becomes less about chasing the biggest solution and more about building the right one. On this channel, we explore that shift step by step. No hype, no unrealistic claims, just clear, grounded discussions about how energy actually works and how everyday households can think about it differently. In upcoming videos, we'll break down why traditional solutions like solar and generators don't always solve the full problem, what really happens during extended outages, how to identify your home's essential energy needs, and how some households are building simple, efficient systems to maintain stability. If this kind of practical thinking is useful, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to explore a real-world example of how these principles are being applied in a way that's accessible for everyday homes, there's a resource linked in the description. You'll also find it in the first pinned comment. It connects directly to what we discussed today, not as a theory, but as a practical application of these ideas. Subscribe, check the link in the description or pinned comment, and I'll see you in the next video.